Continuing on with our profiles of the 7 presidents of Pennsylvania, we explore George Bryan, the 2nd president. Now, this is a little debatable as contemporary documents do not refer to him as anything other than the vice president, equivalent to the modern office of lieutenant governor. Regardless, following Wharton's death while the Supreme Executive Council was in hiding in Lancaster, Bryan would serve as the president for 6 months and 1 week, concluding on December 1st, 1778, when he failed to win the vote, losing to his successor Joseph Reed by a 63-1 vote. Strangely enough, though, he would win the vote to continue as vice president by an equally one-sided margin, and he would remain the vice president until October 11th, 1779, when he would resign. But that's how his story in Pennsylvania political life ends. It started across the Atlantic Ocean in Dublin, part of the then Kingdom of Ireland, where he was born in 1731. A little over 20 years later, he would immigrate to Pennsylvania. He was a successful importer-exporter, and it was in this capacity that he would become politically involved, not unlike Thomas Wharton Jr. and other Stamp Act opposing merchants who would become incredibly influential in the American Revolution. The University of Pennsylvania, from their archives, has this to say: when the Stamp Act was passed in 1765, Bryan's attention turned from provincial issues to ones of empire. He took a role in resisting the oppressive act by joining other Philadelphia merchants in signing the non-importation agreement to resist the Stamp Act and the Townshend duties. This action likely contributed to his bankruptcy in 1771. End quote. Again, like Wharton, Bryan would become a member of the Philosophical Society, a group created by Benjamin Franklin in 1743 for the stated purpose of promoting useful knowledge, and that society still exists. Shortly after becoming a member, he would become directly involved in politics as the new Pennsylvania Constitution was being drafted. Again, like Wharton, he favored the more democratic form embodied by the Supreme Executive Council. From my understanding of what I've read, it seems like Bryan was a proponent of the creation of a parliamentary system, but this was not to be. Again, I'm going to quote from the University of Pennsylvania's archives. He, Bryan, also pushed for the emancipation of all enslaved people in Pennsylvania, which subsequently served as a model for gradual emancipation in all of the northern colonies. He felt that a new nation devoted to personal freedoms, slavery was a moral disgrace. This is his most enduring legacy. In the later 1780s, he fought earnestly against the federal constitution and a new state constitution advocating a bicameral legislation and a single executive. End quote. So I've quoted the University of Pennsylvania a bit already, as the institution has a direct tie to Bryan, his having served on its board of trustees from 1779 until his death in 1791. From 1779 until 1788, he had been the board's treasurer. So, having first been elected as vice president under the first Pennsylvania president, Thomas Wharton Jr., George Bryan would act as president following Wharton's death. In this capacity, he would see the council return to Philadelphia. Considered something of a radical as akin to Thomas Paine, this was not just in regard to his strong and early abolitionist stance, but also because of his anti-federalist stance. George Bryan's son, Samuel, has been described as the writer of the Letters of Sentinel, but this is debated, and some believe that these letters were written in part by the father, George Bryan. Letters of Sentinel would be a series of anti-federalist essays which were critical of the proposed United States Constitution, which the writer or writers claimed was designed for the benefit of the well-born few. Today, George Bryan's remains are buried in Philadelphia's Laurel Hill Cemetery. This historic cemetery, though, was not created until the early mid-1830s. The cemetery organizers attempted to establish the cemetery's reputation early on by moving the bodies of notable revolutionary figures to their newly established cemetery. This included not just George Bryan, but also Thomas McKean, who would be the second governor of Pennsylvania and for whom McKean County in the northern tier is named. That said, I cannot find any details as to where Bryan's body lay in those intervening decades.